Hello everyone, my name is Isaac and welcome to a video that's going to be talking about sequences that you can use to make your ad profitable. So just to clarify, obviously I am a consultant and we have clothing brand scale from 4 figures to 6 figures, and we use this through paid acquisition. Once again, this can apply to just any brand, e-commerce brands too. You're included, but if you're running ads for yourself, there is a few different things that you need to consider. And we have a 7-step sequence that we always run to make sure our ads are always working, are always profitable, because it's not just about running an ad, it's about making sure the ad is a winning creative or winning ad. And obviously with the new updates, with the Andromeda update and with the new things that are going to add Facebook, it's hard to get up to date. But the only thing that will never change is the framework and the idea and the concepts behind the sequences or behind the ads. So we're going to be going over that, and we're going to be going over our strategy and how we do this for our clients, right? The first thing we identify whenever we're running ads is we look at the math. It's very important, especially for clothing brands. When you guys have such thin margins, if you're running ads and if you don't have enough to be able to account for ad spend or be able to burn through ads, you're going to waste a lot of money. So I always say this to my clients: it's not about how much you spend, but it's about how much you spend effectively and wisely. And this is how we do it. So the first thing we have to look at is math, and this is the first sequence, because everything in life and everything in every system, every single thing follows a sequence. It follows a trajectory, right? It's all kind of linear, right? So the first sequence we look at and the first step we take, like frog jumps, is math. So during this phase, we do some discovery and calculation. So the number one thing we're looking at here is the contribution margin. Now, I don't want to confuse you with all these terms and ideology, so I'll break it down. So essentially, a contribution margin is one of the most important numbers you're going to need to calculate if you want to be able to run ads. The reasoning behind this is because think about it like this: your contribution margin is the thing, right? And that margin, that amount of money you hold after every sale, and after you've when you're running ads, that amount of money you hold is the thing that pays yourself. It's the thing that actually accounts for ads. So let's just contribute that, as the name suggests, contribute that towards ads, your expenses and profit, right? Because think about this: if you're currently running a team, you have people designing for you, you have people packing for you, and you need to pay. Your contribution margin is the thing. It's the amount of money you're going to hold to contribute to the external factors, right? So it's very important that you calculate this first. And another thing as well you need to look at, that we look at, is your average order value. One of the biggest problems you're going to have as a clothing brand, for example, if you have a average order value of $30 or something below that, then it's going to be quite difficult to scale the brand. The reasoning behind that is because if your average order value, and just to clarify, the average order value is obviously the total or the average order, or the value of the order a person will get, or you will get when a person makes a purchase. So for example, if your hoodies or t-shirts stem from $70 to $80, let's just assume that the average order value would be anywhere from like 75. You would make an average, right? But that's for each individual order. So if for example as well, you're selling a hoodie for $80, but the average order value for that hoodie would be $80, right? It's different when you're looking across the across the whole products you spend, but it's different from when you're looking across the whole product you spend versus just one product. But yeah, we want to calculate the average order value, because like I said, if your average order value is way too low, then running ads won't make sense because your margins will be too thin, right? Once we calculate the contribution margin and we look at the average order value, it's very important as well that we assess the average order value, because we need to know what the GM is. Your GM is your gross margin, right? That's essentially just the money you take after a sale. It's just the product cost deducted from the sale, right? So for example, if you are selling a hoodie for $80 and someone buys it, right? Well, the amount it's costed you to make the product, or your cogs, right? Your cogs, your cost of goods, the amount it's costed you to take to make the product, you take that away from the product itself. So if you're selling a hoodie for $80, your cost of good is $30, your gross margin is $50, right? Now, the reason why we have to calculate the contribution margin and get the average order value with the gross margin is because we times this together to find our safe CAC. Before you run ads on your clothing brand, it's very important that you know how much is it costing you to acquire a customer. This is a very important metric because we use this to be able to find out whether we can scale or not. Now, we have this scale math calculator thing that we are able to identify the contribution margin, and I'll show you this in a minute, that we use for our clients. But once again, we use this because we want to be able to identify a safe CAC. This sequence is super important. Without knowing the maximum amount you can spend to acquire one customer, you're just going to be guessing, right? And the reason why it needs to be a safe CAC is because it's not just enough to know how much it costs to acquire a customer. We need to know how much it costs to acquire a customer and be able to keep profit, right? So that's why we calculate the safe CAC. The other things we look at, right, or your ROAS floor and your MER target. Now, your ROAS floor is simply just your break-even ROAS. It's nothing too complicated. You guys have probably heard the term ROAS, right? We typically tend to look at all these different metrics when we're doing the math first. Everything else obviously does matter. Your conversion rate, your click-through rate, your cost per purchase, all that stuff matters, yes. But when we're running ads, the first thing we pay attention to, the priority is obviously the ROAS floor, your safe CAC, your contribution margin, and your MER. So your ROAS floor essentially is your break-even ROAS. Anything below this means you're losing money. So if you have a ROAS of 1.6, meaning if you do your total revenue divided by your ad spend, okay, and total revenue is how much you've accumulated at the transaction of sales. And I break things down not to make, I'm assuming you're not dumb, but I break things down just in case you don't know what I'm talking about. But your ROAS floor is your total revenue, so how much revenue you generated, divided by your total ad spend, so how much you spent on ads. That is your ROAS, right? But you need to be able to find your break-even ROAS, right? And anything below this means you're losing money. So if you have a ROAS of like 1.6, right? Your break-even ROAS, sorry, is of 1.6, right? And then you run ads and you get a ROAS of 1.4, well, you're losing money. So you need to get to 1.6 in order to not lose money. Anything above 1.6, that's the margin that you can use to be able to define how much money you're going to make. So if your break-even ROAS is 1.6, but then you have a ROAS of 2.6, right? Well, you're increasing by 1, right? So everything above 1.6 is your. The next thing we look at is your MER target. So that's your total revenue divided by your total marketing spend on all channels. Now, the reason why we track MER more than ROAS nowadays is because ROAS doesn't account for your cost of goods. That's why we also look at your contribution margin, because once again, you can have a 5x ROAS, but if your cost of goods, is damn near like 10,000, let's just assume it's a crazy number here, but 10,000. The problem you're going to face is that even if you've generated so much revenue, it's going to get absolutely eaten by all the cost of goods, right? So that's why we look at MER, because we need to look at the total revenue divided by the total market spend on all channels. And this is the honest measure of ad performance. This is how we know if an ad is performing well. So this is the discovery and calculation phase. Once we're able to calculate this, we're able to diagnose all the numbers and then tell these brands or tell our clients that, look, we can run ads or we can increase ads. If it doesn't make sense to do it, we won't do it. Sometimes, yes, you can still run ads and push past these barriers, but it is safer to have, a little bit of control, not on the market, because you'll never get control in the market, but get control over your own purchasing decisions, right? And just to give some clarity on the scale math calculator, this is one of the obviously the older versions. We have a more updated UI and stuff like this now. But the reason why we have all these metrics is because when we're calculating the scale math, like I said, we input this all into the system. So with the scale math, let's just assume the average order value was $80. Your conversion rate, so how many, your conversion rate of how many sales you're getting was like 5%. Your monthly website sessions was 5,000, right? Your average cost per good per order was 20. Your shipping and packing cost 5. Payment processing fees 2, return rate. I've inputted a bunch of just different values here. This is kind of how we calculate this. Obviously, this is just an example, but let's just assume your average order value was $80 with a conversion rate of 5% and your monthly website sessions were 5,000, right? So that would roughly give you around 250 monthly orders. We'd be able to see right now your unit economics. We'll be able to see your break-even CAC and your safe target CAC. So we already know how much you need in order to, how much it costs to acquire a customer and generate profit, and we can see your gross profit margin. Now, according to this, right, our current CAC is quite safe. It's within the safe range. The safe CAC is the target we want to hit is 36, right? Our current CAC, it's within a safe range, but we have all this because it shows us whether we're capable of doing this. So with this system, we have multiple indicators that tell us the scale. We can see that the current, our customer acquisition cost is fine. And based off our customer acquisition, we can see our estimated profit per month at safe CAC. So we can see that from 250 orders, even after overhead, even after all our overhead costs, we'd still be doing 15,360 profit. So once again, it's very important that we calculate all our numbers. It gives us a direct roadmap, if you will say, of every single thing that we need to look at. So this way we can tell our clients, okay, cool. That's when we talk to our clients on Slack or WhatsApp and be like, okay, cool, we need to increase ad spend because clearly we can scale, if that makes sense. And once again, it's not just enough that we look at this, we also input the data into here, so because we always double check things and stress test things. So we have another sheet that calculates pretty much everything. I can go ahead and show you, but we can see the revenue by the month, and we have this ad creative log where we look at certain creatives by the month, and we're able to get a rough estimate on how well an ad will perform and how much they'll be able to profit. Like, I know this looks like a lot on the screen, but it's things like this, the sequences we build, not even systems, because we don't call it systems, right? A system, yes, you need a system, but we follow a chronological order and we have a sequence. That's why our clients are always profitable, right? Now, the next thing we look at is the creative. So the creative is the sequence, right? That's the second sequence. So over here we're doing some format discovery. Now the format can vary. In your case, it could be a static, it could be a video, it could be a carousel, but the first thing we look at is variation. It's very important now with the new Andromeda update that you have some variation to the ad. It's not just enough to have one picture, one slideshow, one carousel and just rotate that. No, if you're going to do a video, have 5 different angles of the same video if possible, or get just 5 different completely different videos but the same type of concept. Concept overpowers, the creative volume nowadays. Volume doesn't mean nothing in the market. It's the kind of the concept. So if you, for example, are running UGC ads, it's important that you tell, your creators to give you multiple different shots or multiple different angles and re-record the same video but from multiple different angles, because the Facebook algorithm is quite smart. So that's why we have 3 to 5 variations of the same different ad. And whenever we're doing the ad, we always look at 3 most important things. Number 1, the duration. So that's how long the video is, whether that's 15 to 60 seconds. The hook, and like I said, you have about 3 seconds to stop someone's scroll. It's not about, getting attention, it's to stop someone's scroll, right? And then once we've delivered the hook, we need the body. So the body needs to present 2 things, a problem and a solution. And every time I talk to my clients, I always emphasize this. Your product should already show a transformation, right? It should be damn near like a testimonial. That's the way we talk about it. Your product should be a testimonial. It should show the transformation from one identity to the other identity. And then your ad serves as a message, or serves as a video, or serves as a picture, or whatever way you want to frame it. So the customer is entitled to feel that if I get this product, I'm going to go from this point to that point, right? And your product fills in the gap that the customer needs to fill in. And they can't fill in themselves because your clothes does the job for them. So once again, within the ad, we present a problem and a solution. And that's when you can, through the sequence, you can identify and kind of break down how you want to do that. But once again, with our clients, every time we're looking at the ad, it's not just about running a static image ad. We need to present a problem and a solution and a way to solve it. That's how we win. So once we've done the creative, the next thing we're looking at right here is the offer. Right, so the offer is one of the most important things about the ad. That's the next sequence. So we do a defining offer, right? So this is what we call an irresistible acquisition offer. It's an IAO. An irresistible acquisition offer is essentially a non-negotiable offer that ensures they buy the product. You need to understand that no one's just going to buy the product because, your clothes look cool. I'm sure that you know this already, but people online are making hundreds, if not thousands, of good-looking clothes. You're not going to be the first person to make a heat thermal reactive jacket or waffle knit, and you certainly won't be the last. How can you have advantage over your competitors? Well, the way our clients do it is to make sure that their offer stops the scroll, right? Because you need to understand, whenever you're running an ad, it is a bottom of funnel, right? Now, your ad should only serve 3 purposes: curiosity, consideration, and conversion. During the sequence, when you're defining the offer, right, and you're making this irresistible acquisition offer, number 1, if you're targeting cold traffic and these people have never seen your ad before, right, it should invoke curiosity. So they should stop the scroll, look at the clothes, imagine themselves in the clothes through the format, through the this is where it all comes in. That's why it's a very chronological sequence. Ad already should present a problem and a solution. A problem and a solution the customer never thought that they had, right? So during the curiosity phase, I would even argue it kind of links here. During the curiosity phase, it should present a problem and a solution. And when you're watching the ad on Instagram or on Facebook, you look at the person or the model wearing the clothes, you sit back for a second, you think, I wonder what I would look like in my clothes. That is when you invoke curiosity. From curiosity, that's when, if, for example, if they didn't convert on the first ad, that's why we get retargeting ads, because then we take them from curiosity to consideration. And consideration is when they go from the ad into your site, add it to the cart, or view cart, or just look at the product and imagine. They're like, you need to understand, it's all about psychology. These people aren't just clicking on your ad and wanting to buy. They are contemplating and considering whether they should get it or not. And during the consideration phase, it's very important, obviously, when you have the retargeting campaign on the end. And why retargeting campaigns always do the best or always perform well, because you're already re-invoking interest in customers that wanted to buy but probably didn't in that certain moment. From curiosity, we take them to consideration, and during the consideration phase, that's when we build up on the offer, the irresistible acquisition offer. So they're like, it makes absolutely no sense for me not to get the product. So from the consideration phase, that is when we attack with retargeting, and with retargeting, that's when we eventually convert them, right? And obviously you can get your conversions, and you can get all this data, way important data, through KPIs, not KPIs, CAPIs, sorry, so CAPIs. And obviously your pixel nowadays is calm, but it's not as effective as it used to be. So obviously your pixel should already be set up, but having the conversion API would just give you way more metrics, because it could tell you, like, your pixel could tell you 1,000 people added it to cart, but your conversion API, because obviously you have iOS ad blockers, which most people add nowadays, that CAPI will tell you way more, like maybe 800 more people wanted to add to cart but forgot to. Once we've defined the offer and once we've established these 3 things, this is when we do the review, because during the offer phase, the ad ads already running, right? So the next sequence now is to review. We need to review and comply. So one of the biggest issues that people tend to have when they're running ads is that they run ads and then they get, they take it off real quick. And it's very important that you understand that ads aren't a get rich quick scheme. It's not like trading. It's not like all these things where you just run it and there's hope. No. There's strategy. There is literal planning, a process. There is a sequence, as I'm showing you right now, that you can be able to use it. So this is when we review and comply. So during the testing phase, we always assume an ad is a test. We never assume an ad is a winner. We always look at the ad as a test. And during this test, we have a 7-day rule. The reason why we have a 7-day rule is because of a learning phase, right? And as you guys know, with Facebook ads, each campaign needs time to learn, right? It needs time to learn. And if you're wondering what it needs time to learn, well, it needs time to learn your audience. It needs time to learn your budget and how much of it to use every single day, and it needs time for conversion, right? In order to see how long does it take from someone to see your ad and then to convert. And if your ad cannot do that, if your ad cannot see that time, it will not be able to run effectively. So people recommend 50 conversion per ad set per week. I know now this is obviously nuanced. Some people say, it takes, you can get out the learning phase a lot longer with the higher budget, or maybe, with a better offer, and you can get people to convert quicker. Yes, you can. But if you're just running ads for the first time, and if you're a clothing brand or an e-commerce brand and you're running these ads for the first time, you don't know what you're doing, it's important that it's going to at least take 50 conversions per ad set per week. Now, conversion, it would either be a sale or, you can extrapolate this to whatever you need. But once again, we have a 7-day rule. And the reason why is because we found that the reason why our ads perform so well isn't because we have the best offer, isn't because we have the best creative, isn't because we have the best video, but because we're willing to just be patient, reassure our client, and let them know that these ads will perform well if they are given enough time. Right, that's why we have killers here. The next sequence we have is the tracking phase. So once we've gone from review, we need to go into tracking. Now, tracking is absolutely effective because there are 5 things that we look at. So during the tracking phase, we look at the business, right? So these are business metrics we look at. So we look at MER, profit, customer acquisition, and lifetime value. We need to be able to determine, and obviously, customer acquisition cost versus lifetime value. We need to be able to assess how much does it cost to acquire a customer and how much value are they actually giving us, right? Because for example, if it costs you $80 to get a customer and their lifetime value is $90, that's just a $10 difference, then clearly something is wrong. So we need to be able to ensure that the customer acquisition cost is low, but with the lifetime value of them having high, right? So if it costs you $20 to get a customer, but their lifetime value is $90, for example, because your average order value is up in that scale, then it just makes sense. And knowing all of these and making sure that these are all congruent gives us the question whether, well, does this make us money? Is this ad currently make us money? And are we growing profitably? Right? The next metric we look at is the campaign. So we look at the ROAS, the customer cost per acquisition, and revenue. Now, with the campaign, once again, we don't look at a campaign and say a campaign is profitable based on ROAS, right? Yes, the campaign could be performing well off a high ROAS, yes, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're profitable. So that's why we have to look at the ROAS, your cost per acquisition, and the revenue, right? Is this campaign profitable, and is the customer acquisition cost within our target? Are we hitting our targets, as we said, right? The next thing we look at is your delivery. So this is your cost per mile, or cost per milli, your frequency, and your reach. Is the algorithm delivering it efficiently? Is it creative fatiguing, right? Because one thing that people don't understand is that you can have an amazing offer, but once again, if you have a good offer, typically, if you have a good enough offer, your ad shouldn't die, right? Well, that's up for debate. But the point is, your delivery is just as important as every other thing there. If your ad is not reaching enough people, and if your creative is fatiguing, then you just need to get rid of it. Right? Because, well, sometimes you can, you can increase budget because maybe sometimes it's not a fatigue problem. Maybe it's a frequency or reach problem. And then, you can do that. You can determine that there, but it's very important to be able to assess the delivery of the ad or the campaign. The next thing is engagement. So we look at engagement because it's very important. We need to see the click-through rate, the video view rate, and the hook rate. This is to be able to determine whether the creative is actually working and people are stopping to engage. If people aren't stopping to engage, or if you haven't stopped people scroll, right? It's not about getting attention. It's just about stopping the scroll, right? If you've gotten people to stop the scroll and we're able to see a high click-through rate, then that's amazing. But for example, if you have a high click-through rate, okay, but a low conversion rate, then it's probably your website that's the problem, right? Because if people are clicking on the ad and people are, people are going from the ad to your website, but they're not buying, then why? Why are they not buying, right? Because if they clicked on the ad and they're like, oh wow, this is nice and I want to get this, but they didn't buy, it's probably because your website is the issue, right? So this is where we're able to see if the creative is working and are people starting to engage. Now, when it comes to vanity metrics, obviously we look at the likes, comments, and shares and follows, but we only use it as a kind of a sign to know that this is good for social proof. We don't optimize for likes, comment, and follows, because at the end of the day, we don't care about likes or comments and shares. Yes, they're important, but they're not going to guarantee sales. A lot of people, and as a brand founder, you've probably seen 10, 50, 100, 200 people have said, oh, I'm going to buy your product by habit, right? We don't care about that. What we care about is actually converting the customer from the ad or from your content or from your page into a sale, right? No, the last and final sequence we have is iteration. One important thing, right, that people don't tend to account for is iteration. So the whole concept of iteration is improving every single time. It's not enough just to find an ad that is doing good. We need to go on top of that to make sure ads are consistently doing good, right? And this is how we kill it, right? So look, this is the sequence we have. So after testing 3 to 5 different ad creatives in different ad sets, identify the winner. So this is the kind of the process we use. So we identify the winner because obviously with the Andromeda update, it's not just about volume. You can't post the same ad 3 to 5 times and then hope it will do well. Andromeda will just find the one good ad and then you'll just push spend or push budget to that, right? But that's obviously if you're running it from a CBO, not ABO. But once again, what I'm trying to say here is we identify the winner, right? We identify the winner product or the winner ad, sorry. And then from that, we do an extraction process. So the extraction process is tracking all metrics. So this is business, campaign, delivery, and engagement, okay? Because we look at the creators that did well and we track these 4 things. We track these 4 metrics. So does this, obviously, is the ad making us money? Are we growing profitably? Is this campaign profitable? So is the customer acquisition within our target? Is the algorithm delivering efficiently? And is the creative working? So once we track all this, we do a discovery because we need to run a case study. Why did the ad perform well according to data? Once again, we don't just look at a video and think that, okay, it was the lighting in this video that didn't make the ad do well. Yes, obviously the creative format, the video, the picture is important, it's significant, yes, but it does not necessarily mean that people bought. There is a lot of ads that are just visually less appealing but do significantly better, not because of the way it looks, but just because of what it's trying to represent, the concept behind it, right? So then we fall into 2 things, right? So can we replicate this ad in the same format so that it's video, carousel, image for same or similar results? If yes, how can we replicate this once more with slight variation? Okay. And if no, what can we do to what can we slightly improve to ensure the ad works once more? One thing you need to understand is just because the ad works well as a video doesn't necessarily mean if you post the same video or post the same ad once again, it will do well. Sometimes it just won't, sometimes it will. That's just Facebook. But what you can do is you can convert that video into maybe a carousel or maybe an image. So that's why we determine this. If yes, how can you replicate it just once more with slight variation? So if it proves well to do a video, then yes. For example, if it has a high click-through rate, right? Well, we're going to reuse the same hook, but we're going to just slightly vary the body of the video, right? The body of the ad, right? And that's what we'll do. But for example, if it just has a low click-through rate, but let's say like if it has like a lower click-through rate or like a lower hook rate, for example, but higher conversions, then we're like, okay, cool. Maybe we just need to change the format of the ad, or maybe we can just keep it the same, but we can slightly improve it to make sure the ad works once more. Because a winner, right, just means the best ad that did out of everything. It's just the best ad that did out of all the 3 to 5 sets of ads that you tested. It doesn't necessarily mean the ad is going to have a 16x ROAS. It just means that ad did the best out of every other ad you tested. That's why you need to assess whether you can replicate it once more with slight variation, or if you can slightly improve it to make sure the ad works once more, right? So we do this through the scientific method. So the scientific method is essentially a 4-step process that allows you through iteration to be able to improve on something and to be able to determine what works and what doesn't work. So through the scientific method, we come up with the hypothesis. So our hypothesis is over here. So can we replicate the same format or ad? So we think, we ask ourselves, okay, cool, this ad did well. How can we make sure it works again? Or do we do it, right? So we come up with the hypothesis, a theory that if we change just, the first 3 seconds and if we change the body, if we do this, then hopefully it'll work. So through the hypothesis, we have execution. So then obviously we execute the ad, once again, following the sequence. So we don't just, yay, cool, this ad works. No, we make sure the math makes sense and the creative makes sense and the offer makes sense, and then we execute. And during execution, we review. So this is when we come into the 3rd sequence here, the 4th sequence, sorry, and then we review and comply. So we give it another time. We give it like 7 days. We have to test it. We need to be able to understand that the campaign needs time to learn, right? So once that's done, that's when we synthesize. So once we've come to, once we've hypothesized, we've executed, we reviewed it, then we come to a conclusion. Did this ad perform well? And this is when we kind of cycle back to this, and it kind of forms back as a feedback loop. And then once again, like I was saying, it kind of works like this. So we come from a synthesize, and then from another thing is then it comes back to hypothesis. So we hypothesize once more, right? Can we have, can we make it possible? And then we just continue to follow this process over and over again until we find every single winning creative. And then we're just able to make winning ads. And the reason why we make winning ads, like I said, isn't because of rocket science. We're not just, we aren't just guessing here. No, we have data, we have metrics. And once we look at the data, once we look at the metrics, we're able to review it, know why the ad did well, and then do it all over again. Once again, this is the sequence that will make your ad profitable. If you are a clothing brand owner or your e-commerce brand and you're trying to run ads yourself, you don't understand how this is all working, once again, you can DM me on Instagram, DM me Profit or whatever. You can check out my Instagram, you can see what we do, and we can book a call and talk and see what your current situation is if you want to run ads on your page and get it going. And if you really, really want to scale the brand, if you really want to take it from where it is to where you want to be, because organic is good, but it's a bottleneck because it's not performing as well, then by all means, let's book a call. Let's have an interview in 90 days, talk about how we scale the brand crazily. And then, I don't know, if you want to go on a flight together, let's do it, because I'm down to go wherever you want to go. We can go to Paris, we can go to Paris, we can go to France, we can go to Spain. I don't drink champagne, go insane with the clothing brands on our face. Anyways, if that's something you're interested in and you want to see what we do, then by all means book a call and let's get these ads running. All right, see you later, take care, and goodbye.